What is the scariest film that doesn't resort to cheap jump scares? Zodiac. That scene with the couple being stabbed in the park occurs in broad daylight and has such a calmness to it. Not many people have basements in California. I do. Are you sure you're home alone? As dust is falling for the ceiling. The whole interaction with that man had me on the edge of my seat. This movie from the early 1980s called The Changeling with George C. Scott. Granted, I haven't watched it in decades, but it terrified me. It's a ghost story and low budget, not gory or anything, but my bedroom in high school was in the basement, so I slept on the couch for a couple of weeks afterward. Coraline. One word, buttons. I think it was so scary because it was a kids' movie. The writers couldn't resort to gore or cheap jump scares to scare the audience. They had to focus on the unsettling atmosphere and characters. The Serpent and the Rainbow is about an archaeologist who goes to Haiti to study voodoo, and it follows him home to the States. Horrific. Anytime the evil in a horror movie can follow a person, family, etc., it makes it infinitely more scary in my book. That's part of why Paranormal Activity and Insidious were so scary to me. When people can easily leave a place but don't, it just makes me angry at them. When they try to leave and it doesn't help, now that's scary. 1408 was like this for me. Started out thinking he knew better. I think this a lot of the reason Stephen King is so good at horror. His characters are often reasonable people thrust into something bigger than what they can control. It's terrifying when instead of going, "Wow, what an idiot," you say, "Oh shit, I would have done the same thing," or "I don't see how anyone could escape that." When people mention King on Reddit, I like to plug one of his newer books, Revival. Different from his other stuff, not necessarily scary but existentially horrifying. Also has a great ending. Whenever people mention King in Scary Things threads on Reddit, I always comment that The Langoliers was the scariest movie I've ever seen. That shit brought out some mental health issues and put me into a funk of paranoia for a few years. But no one takes me serious. In order to avoid the classics that were already mentioned, I want to at least give an honorable mention to The Green Room. Therese, something scary about being confined to a space where everyone outside wants to kill you in the backcountry. And Captain Picard as a crazy-ass Nazi is terrifying. The Shining is a classic example, but a recent film was quite good and didn't have much jump scares. It's The Ritual. I thought The Ritual was okay, but I didn't like it as much as some others. I thought you were going to say Hereditary. I think Hereditary is much closer to what The Shining was, which was really great imagery, cinematography, and tension building. I didn't mean to compare The Ritual and The Shining, as The Ritual has nowhere near the cinematography and atmosphere The Shining creates. I just mention it as a good recent horror film without much jump scares. I haven't heard about that film Hereditary before, but it sounds quite good. Thanks, smile. I actually was really impressed by The Ritual since it seemed like the type of movie that would use some jumps, but it didn't. It was just some good old creepy KVLT shit in the European woods. The monster looked really good too. Usually when movies hide the monster for a late reveal, it's always disappointing and cheesy when you finally get to see it. But when they revealed this guy, I was just like, oh hell yes, that's cool. Fire Walk with Me, Eraserhead. The scene where Laura runs out of her house and hides by a bush, then sees Leland exit the house, and she says, "It's not him. It's not him," is probably the best depiction of trauma I've ever seen on screen. Very talented actress. Gut-wrenching. Edit, here is the scene. Other horribly intense scenes. It's him. It's your father. Fire Walk with Me. Me. I believe she had no acting experience before the show. Originally she was supposed to just portray a dead body. Audition by Takashi Miike. It's a slow roast horror movie about deception. Ducking terrifying. Came here to say this. Watched it when I was 12 and it was a massive mistake. Rosemary's Baby. The movie feels just wrong. My whole body was screaming no. To that movie, it is so uncomfortable. The terror of gaslighting. The fear of gaslighting is real. I know some people have mixed reviews on this movie, but that's a big reason why I found Mother so terrifying. The Witch is the horror movie that stayed the longest with me. The horror comes from a feeling of dread and evil, not jump scares. The 1963 version of Shirley Jackson's creepy book The Haunting. No special effects, no CGI, no rubber monster, just good, scary writing and acting. All alone. In the night. In the dark. Thank God, someone mentioned this. I totally recommend it. Some scenes made me have goosebumps, which I don't usually get from horror movies. Like the scene where the door was wide open, or when Eleanor spotted the doctor's wife on the roof, or the whose hand was I holding. I thought Hereditary was pretty scary, but was also baked while watching. I wasn't baked. It was still well scary. I don't know if scary is more accurate than deeply unsettling or like traumatic. It is frightening, but not in the way people have been conditioned to be frightened by horror movies. I think that's part of the contingent of people who keep saying things it was silly, it's just so different than what we're accustomed to. The feeling of dread is at an all-time high, but I don't think it's scary the same way like The Conjuring is scary, or thrilling the same way any slasher film is thrilling. It's wildly upsetting though, more so than any other film I've ever seen, especially if you're sensitive to family-related trauma. The dinner argument and the dream sequence following that got literal gasps from the theater I was in. Followed by what the ducks during the attic scene. Hereditary felt like a 2-hour-long panic attack. The feeling of unease and dread that it cultivates is truly impressive. Seriously. I really felt like on the verge of a nervous breakdown watching it, and I've seen tons of movies, literally thousands upon thousands, and nothing has ever done that to me the way Hereditary does. I literally can't stop talking about it, it made me feel so intensely. I still felt bad and anxious the next day after seeing it, I thought the movie infected me. Sphere. It's a crappy movie that apparently no one likes except me, but still it's a pretty mind-duck type scary movie emo. If you haven't, you should give the book a read. I love a good Michael Crichton book. I wish they would make more movie adaptations of his work. Prey would be a good one. Alien is just horrifying to me. It's weird how the tone of the sequel is completely different than the first one, but still ends up being one of the best movies ever. That's a common discussion when the series comes up. Alien 1 is a claustrophobic horror film that was captured well in the game Alien: Isolation. Aliens is essentially a war film in space lol. I played through half of Alien: Isolation in VR, on the Oculus DK2. Never once got bored hiding in a locker for 5 minutes because the locker was exactly where I wanted to be. It was safe. The Road. Watched it once, haven't been able to since, seen plenty of post-apocalypse gore fests, but there's something about The Road that just, I dunno, it's duckin' creepy. The best movie that you'll never want to watch ever again. That's the way I feel about all of his books. Blood Meridian was the only book I both could not put down, then never pick up again. The Mothman Prophecy purely psychological. Aside from a couple well-timed phone calls and one scene in the car, no cheap jump scares. Came here to say this. This is the most unsettling film I have ever seen. I can't even explain why. It was designed to be that way. Every time I watch the movie, I notice different things. For example, the characters' reflections in mirrors will be out of sync. That weird face made me jump. When Richard Gere leaves. I had to look for the clip again, it looks like an alien face, not just desynced. Where'sthejump.com. It tells you when jump scares occur in movies, and how many jump scares are in that movie. It's a great resource if you don't like jump scares. Or if you hate someone who doesn't like jump scares. Or if you hate someone who loves jump scares. I always make a case for Pontypool. It has an incredibly unique setup where we spend most of the time in a secluded radio station as reports come in about riots and mass murders. Not really a spoiler, it's kind of a zombie film. However, the way that all this information and development comes in through caller testimonies, eyewitness accounts, and broadcasts is very disturbing and distressing. It leaves it to your imagination to envision these horrific atrocities. Unfortunately, the later half of the film gets a little predictably cliché, and there's an underlying theme of communication and journalism, but I find myself constantly rewatching this film, discovering new clues, and shuddering every time. It's always worth a revisit. The trailer really conveys the atmosphere throughout the film.